Opening statement, we visited just a couple days ago. Obviously, we've had a couple padded practices, which have been good. Everything's going well at this time. Guys are handling the weather, working hard. We haven't had any issues one way or the other that are worth talking about. So we're just moving forward with kind of where we're at, and we've got a long ways to go. But we've got a good group, as I mentioned earlier. I'm excited. I like watching. I like what I see with the coaching, the interaction with the players, guys' effort, responsibility, the loyalty to each other and the team, and so I'm excited about where we're at. But we got a lot of work ahead of us.
Mike, you told us last year, like mid-season, before you realized how good you were. Do you have any sense for how good you might be at this point or could be?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, we weren't very good the first 4, 5, or 6 games, and when you put it on the national platform, we were beat up. We couldn't practice very hard. We struggled to get through practice. We were playing freshmen that shouldn't have been on the field, but they had to be out there by default, so we had to adjust game plans offensively. Defense carried us. And once we got healthy and we started to practice the way that we're accustomed to practice, and we had some continuity, quarterback could get a feel for what's going on outside on the perimeter, I felt like we were pretty good because nobody could move the ball on us. And for the first time in my career, when we went into a game, I felt like we had a defense that could just stop people. And if we could just manage to score about 15 or 20 points, we could win. So it's so early right now in watching our defense, but I'm comfortable with our pass rush. We're young at linebacker. We can run, we can hit. We don't know a lot because we haven't had many quality reps. We're replacing some safeties in corners, but the corners have had a considerable number of quality reps. So I feel pretty comfortable in the back end. I feel comfortable with coaches. I like the transition where we're at with Coach Mason and Joe Bob moving to linebackers. And then offensively, we are who we are. So now we have more depth than we've had at wideout. Helps us. Obviously, quarterbacks was here. Replacing Jalen Warren will be a task, but we've got guys that are out there running around and competing. And we're in a pretty good position up front right now at the offensive line. We're able to roll the first 2 groups in and be pretty consistent. Third group's getting quality reps, but they're young. So I feel good about our special teams. Our kickers, punters, and snappers are veterans. They've been around. So I feel good about where we're at. Predictions-wise, I don't know. We stay healthy. The team learns to care about each other. We could be pretty good.
Mike, back at the end of spring, because of all the injuries you had, particularly on the offensive line, the guys that were missing, you talked about you might have to amp things up physicality-wise earlier this fall than maybe you typically would. Has that been? Is that still kind of the focus as you try to build that physical nature of this team?
Yes, we've been very physical the last 2 practices. We lost a number of practices for 3 to 5 guys that need the physical aspect of the game, and so we're going to play a little catch up and see where we're at in about 10 practices, and then make a decision on whether we need to push forward with it or we can back off.
Are there 5 guys that you think will be the starters up there at this point, or is there some spots that are kind of open for competition right now?
I think there's 7 guys that have enough experience and we feel like they can play, that we could play at a really high level and play fast if we choose to, that we're comfortable with. I think we have 3 other guys that are coming along. They're learning the system. They're trying to adapt to who we are and what we do. They have the skill there. So I've said this for years. We need 3 guards, 3 tackles, and 2 centers to make it through a season, and hope that we don't ever get anything in. We don't have to go any further than that. when you deal with maturity and experience and toughness. And I think we have that right now. So one of the challenges, in my opinion, in coaching and doing the best job possible as a head coach is how physical can you be, but then also try to keep everybody healthy, because we need them out there in the first game. And that's where we're at right now. So we have a number of guys. He's working some through at different positions, but we've got guys that rotate in with the ones and the twos that played a pretty significant number of snaps this year in quality games, which is better than where we were at last year.
In the spring, I know you talked about Caleb Etienne getting into shape, and he talked about that process today. What do you see in him now that he is out there on the field for fall camp?
Caleb still has a ways to go, but he's a completely different player right now. I'm not for sure, 40 pounds lighter, maybe. I mean, he might be 50 pounds lighter, I'm not sure. But he's in condition now. He's been with us long enough that he understands who we are and how we practice. And so once he got his body under control, now his mind can get under control. Now he can think and play fast. And he's getting better every day. He looks much, much better. He was just a long ways off last year. He was a victim of the COVID. Really the last time he played up until he plays this year will be in high school. They didn't do much in junior college. And so when he showed up, he just had a long ways to go, but he's doing much better at this time.
Mike, one of the things I was anxious to see today, day 4, practice 4, second day in pads, sometimes offensive linemen will kind of go through the motions a little bit. It's hot, but especially talking about Caleb, but really Preston, a bunch of those guys, their energy level was really high today. Do you monitor that pretty closely?
Well, that's really what I watch now. I mean, obviously I don't coach, and I'm watching those things, and that's very important with where we're at. It was interesting, some of the skill was dragging, and the big guys were doing good today, which is the opposite, as you mentioned. I will say that Coach Glass mentioned in our staff meeting a week ago that he felt like we were in really good physical condition, and he doesn't say that much. It's hard to get that out of him, so that made me feel good. And he gauges most of that on the big guys, because the skill kids are going to come along. I mean, they're the most athletic, and so once they get adjusted, they'll be fine. But so far, we're holding up front with our big guys.
As a 4-year starter at quarterback, obviously Spencer's a bit of a unicorn in today's college football world. Is there a way just to quantify how valuable it is to have a guy that experienced taking the snaps?
Well, just what you said is true. There's no substitute for experience and reps, and he's really good at what we do, and he can run any play in our system. All of our really fast plays that we have, which we have a lot now, I think we have 47 of them, and he can run them without even being coached at this point, in my opinion. And he's come a long ways. It's interesting. We have a really simple offense, except for the quarterback. Quarterback takes time, and once they get it, they all of a sudden get better. And it only happens from making mistakes and reps. And unfortunately, a lot of times it happens when they make mistakes in games. And as they grow, and I've said this for a number of years, I played, 5, 6, 7 games as a true freshman. And then about halfway through my true sophomore year, we played Colorado out here. And it was the first time I felt comfortable. And I think I was in maybe game 8 to 10, I don't know what it was. And then I thought all the other stuff was a blur to me. And so he's had a lot of experience now. The game has changed completely. It's much more difficult to play quarterback now than when I played. Much more difficult. And so that experience is really important. And he's tough. He's been beat up, he's been hit on, and so he gets it and he's okay.
Mike, have you figured out if there's any nuance to coaching your son? Have you figured all that out, or did it come pretty easy for you when Gunner first entered the program?
In what area?
Just any area. I mean, just whether it's, I know I want to treat him the same, but it's difficult for me to do it.
Well, it's extremely difficult for both of us. but what I do is I just stay away. So I'm not down there, I'm not around the quarterbacks. Tim does a great job. And so it's best for me to stay away from them and let him coach them and let them function throughout the day. Let him make quarterbacks a freshman mistakes, make mistakes a freshman quarterback mistake, and then let him grow and develop without me down there being involved in it. So I don't know if I'm right because it's the first time I've done it. I just stay away and just let it all take place and don't really get involved in it. And I think that's the best way to handle it.
Do you catch yourself when you're home with him saying, well, I'd really like to talk to him about this or that, and but maybe that's...
No, I talk to him. I mean, he doesn't live at home. He comes there and gets food and leaves, but we don't talk much football at home. Now, the young one, he wears me out on it, but Gunner and I don't really talk much football. Now, if I'm passing him around in the facility, just it's the same thing with Spencer. I was second practice, I was down there on the field for a little bit, and I was talking to Spencer about some stuff, and I talked to Rangel about certain things, and if I see something that I know that's or I think is wrong, then I'll mention it, just like I would most of the other guys, and we'll talk about it, and it's almost in passing. We don't really stop and talk about it much.
Coach,
What is it? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, what do you talk to him about then? You talk to him about life? And
Well,
what's the
Gunner doesn't
conversation?
talk much. Gunner is very quiet and to himself, and he just doesn't. He doesn't really talk much about anything. He studies football, goes to school, got his his friends he hangs out with, and that's it. So he's an easy one to raise. I've got three sons, and each one of them are completely different. And he doesn't really talk much. He lives in his own world. If he needs something, he wants to talk about football. He might find me and talk about it, but it's pretty rare.
What is it
Everybody
like?
wants to be proud of their kids. One thing about him that I've watched as he's come up is his work ethic. I mean, Dave Hunziker asked him today, what'd you clock, or what do you run the 40 in? And he goes, well, they hand timed me at 4.6 at the end of summer camp. I mean, you realize that 4.6 came with a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it didn't come naturally, and it's what we want. I mean, Kristen and I want our kids to work hard and be productive and do the very best they can with the tools that they've been given, and we try to guide them in that direction. And hopefully they have a work ethic that allows them to be successful in life, whatever it is they do. So, fortunately, we've instilled that in him. He is a hard worker. He does it on his own. And so for that reason, that makes me comfortable and makes me feel good about his upbringing. Forget player coach, just his upbringing and where he's at with his work ethic. He came out of high school as a 4.85 guy. And he's 4.6 flat now, which is pretty good. So that was all his work. And they all do, they worked. Spencer went from 4.75 to 4.55. I just looked the other day at Rangel's numbers. Rangel went from, I think his first bench was 190, and I noticed that he was at I think 215 or 220 the other day, and his numbers went from, he was a 4.94, and I think he ran a 4.82 or something. So when they work hard, they're going to progress. With Coach Glass, they're going to get better.
What is that like? I know you all have several Oklahoma Prep kids in general on roster, but especially with Gunner and several of his Stillwater teammates. What is that like kind of with that natural transition from growing up around the university to then having them on the team?
So from day one, I wanted to have a partnership with Stillwater High School coaches and their players. They're right here. And we should have an academic partnership as a university with the high school, in my opinion. I don't control the academic side of it, but from a football standpoint, the Stillwater High School coaches are welcome over in our facility at our practices, watching our video in our meetings anytime they want to come. That's been since I've been here. And just a natural progression when I have boys that they're playing in high school and they come to watch practice, they bring their buddies. So they'll come trailing into practice. Well, you see Gage come in now, he's got 4 or 5 buddies with him. They come into practice and they watch and they see things. That's productive, that's good. It's good that they're in that environment, and they're learning, they're watching, they want to be there. To me, that's productive. And so we've got a pretty good pipeline going with walk-ons now that are on our team. We might have as many as 5 now that are, have decided to come here and be a walk-on and compete, which I think is a positive thing for Oklahoma State and the football and the high school and the community.
You mentioned you were bringing Trace along kind of slowly through camp.
Mhm.
How big is it going to be to get him back next year, just knowing the journey he's had the last couple of seasons?
Yeah, it's a challenge mentally, right? You know, you get injured and then you get injured again, and it can be I guess traumatic is probably a little extreme, but it can be a difficult experience when you take something away from somebody that they really love to do. That's tough on young people. It's tough on adults. And it happened to him, and then he was all ramped up and ready to go, and then it happened again. And so I was really worried about him coming back. You know, he's got a good upbringing, he's got good support, but still it's not easy. And he's healthy now, he feels good, so we're bringing him along slow. We'll give him a little more next week. And then the third week, we'll put him in there in some contact and get him some action, and then we'll get him into game week. And I believe when we play the game and we turn him loose, I think he'll play.
Did you have a lot of contact with him last year as he's trying mentally to kind of stay involved?
We had a number of people that have worked with him, not only as doctors, but people checking on him, his position coaches, Rashedi Jones and director, player personnel. When I would see him around, I would stop and ask him, "How you doing? How's everything going?" He did some of the procedures and medical work that he had done was in Tulsa. He was going back and forth, and I'd ask him how it's going and how they feel about him, and so just touching base with him. He's quiet too. He doesn't talk much. It's hard to get him to really talk a lot, but I think he's I know he's in a much better place now than he was at this time last year.
Yeah. Did you know he started going to road games on his own?
And I didn't know that. That's good. So that's good information. I didn't know that. I guess I probably should have said I did know that, but I didn't know. He might have used NIL for gas money. I know he's been cutting grass for money. So
Mike, last year you mentioned the defense sort of carried the offense early until they got their footing. Is your offense this year in a situation where it could carry the defense if the defense needs it?
they're in a much better position now than we were last year, let's put it that way. I don't foresee that happening. I don't think that needs to happen. I think they'll really play well together. And I said this when I met with you guys a few days ago. It's a little unrealistic for us to expect them to start where they left off last year, because last year they were legitimately in the top 5 in the country, in my opinion. And when you lead the nation in sacks and have multiple games in conference play where you have over 6 or 7 sacks, it's pretty awesome. So I think they're going to play really well. I really do, defensively. And offensively, we're further ahead now from a health standpoint, certainly. And then I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. The replacement issue is Jalen Warren, because he was a really good player for us. If you go back and you guys watch it, but I had the luxury of stopping it and looking and then starting it and stopping it, and he made a lot of yards when there really wasn't yards there sometimes. That's where the replacement is at this point.